What if I told you that the single most powerful moment in your day is the one you keep missing? It happens right before the urge, that instant barely half a breath. When your hand reaches for the screen, your voice sharpens, your heart quickens. The mind calls it automatic, but the field calls it a signal. Because that tiny pause, that flicker before reaction, is the point where reality bends. And most people never notice it. If you're seeing this, it means something in you is ready to notice, not after the choice, not after the regret, but before the impulse even forms. That's the entrance to coherence, the moment where the observer wakes up inside the actor. You've been living on autopilot, rehearsing the same emotional notes in slightly different keys. The same frustrations, the same loops, the same unseen hand guiding your attention toward the familiar. But the reason your life feels like déjà vu is not fate, it's feedback. It's your consciousness repeating patterns until you learn to notice the moment before they begin. Imagine you're standing on a bridge between two realities. On one side, you live from habit, thinking you are the thoughts rushing to fix what the mind calls problems. On the other, you live from awareness, seeing that the thoughts are clouds passing through a much larger sky. The bridge itself is built of stillness. That stillness is what physicists once called the observer effect, the fact that observation changes what is observed. But here, it's not subatomic particles that shift, it's you. When you learn to look without rushing to interpret, your entire field reorganizes. You felt glimpses of it. That split second before anger turns to words. That breath before sending the message you'll later wish you hadn't. That pause before indulging the craving, replaying the argument, or believing the thought. Those moments were invitations to the observer, and each time you ignored them, reality kept looping to give you another chance. This isn't punishment, it's precision. The universe repeats what you don't notice until awareness itself becomes the teacher. Right before the urge is the doorway between timelines. It's where probability collapses into choice. Your biology feels like it's driving, but consciousness has always been in the passenger seat whispering notice. Every trigger is a mirror showing you where your attention still reacts instead of reflects. The shift isn't about suppressing the impulse, it's about witnessing it arise. That single act of observation, calm and curious, begins to rearrange the entire pattern beneath your behavior. Think of it like standing by a river. The current is your thoughts, your emotions, your urges pulling you forward. Most people fall in and call it life. But if you step onto the riverbank just for a heartbeat, you realize something astonishing. You can watch the current without being swept away. That's what happens right before the urge. You glimpse the gap, the 0.3 second eternity, where awareness becomes power. You don't control the river. You influence its flow simply by watching with presence. This is what it means to win through the observer effect, not to dominate, but to notice. Not to conquer desire, but to illuminate its origin before it acts itself out. Every time you catch that breath of awareness before reaction, you're rewriting the code of your reality. You're no longer the pattern. You're the consciousness shaping it. And from that stillness, everything begins to change. Most people live inside what could be called a reality loop. It's invisible, predictable, and self-reinforcing, like a film that keeps replaying the same scene while convincing you it's new. The loop begins not with circumstances, but with perception. A trigger appears, an unfinished email, a tone in someone's voice, a number in your bank account. Instantly, your body reacts before your mind even realizes. Breath shortens, shoulders tighten, the pulse quickens. What happens next is the moment where consciousness is either lost or found. You tell yourself a story about the sensation: I'm under pressure. They don't respect me, I might fail. The meaning forms faster than thought because it's drawn from memory, from thousands of past associations that built your survival code. And that meaning immediately dictates your next action, speaking sharply, retreating, scrolling, defending, buying, distracting. The action in turn produces new evidence. You see the email still unfinished, the conversation awkward, the bank balance unchanged, and the mind declares, "See, this is just how life is." The loop closes, trigger breath, meaning action evidence. Then it begins again. What makes this loop so convincing is that it feels like reality. But what you're actually experiencing is the reflection of your own state. The external world is only the last step in the feedback chain. By the time you see a problem, the quantum dice have already been cast in your nervous system. You're not responding to life. You're responding to your internal broadcast of life. This is why two people can witness the same event. One sees opportunity, the other sees disaster. The difference isn't circumstance. It's coherence. Coherence is what happens when observation precedes reaction. Incoherence is what happens when reaction replaces observation. The human nervous system evolved to detect threats, not truth. It interprets uncertainty as danger even when the danger is only psychological. That's why you can lie awake at night replaying conversations or rehearsing futures that never happen. The body treats imagination as evidence, and because the quantum field mirrors your dominant signal, you keep attracting circumstances that match your inner broadcast. The loop becomes self-validating. It's easy to believe that breaking free requires changing the outer scene. New job, new partner, new plan. But without shifting perception, the same energy writes itself into every new chapter. You can move to another city, but your unobserved breath patterns follow you. You can find a new relationship, but the same old triggers rise in disguise. You can earn more money, but scarcity still whispers through your nervous system. You aren't cursed. You're consistent. The field reflects the vibration you continually feed it. This is the hidden architecture of what some mystics called Maya, the veil of perception. It isn't a supernatural illusion, it's a biological one. The brain predicts experience before it perceives it. 90% of what you see at any moment is your mind filling in missing data to confirm what it already believes. This is why awareness feels like revelation. It's not learning something new. It's finally perceiving what's always been there. Now imagine what happens the moment you begin noticing this mechanism in real time. A trigger appears, but instead of collapsing into the story, you stay with the sensation. You feel the breath tightening, the heat rising, the narrative forming. Yet you do not follow it. You hover in that narrow space before meaning solidifies. Suddenly the loop slows. The mind doesn't know what to do with this kind of attention. The usual chain trigger breath story action breaks. And in that break you glimpse the field's raw potential before your perception molds it into form. This is the perceptual crisis humanity faces collectively. We have learned to react faster than we can observe. The news cycle, social media, and dopamine-driven culture train the nervous system to collapse probability into fear before awareness has a chance to notice. We're constantly mistaking reaction for intuition, distraction for information, emotion for truth. The result is global incoherence. Millions of nervous systems broadcasting confusion into a shared field that dutifully reflects it back as chaos. But the solution isn't withdrawal or avoidance, it's refinement. It's learning to place awareness in the one location that has never been corrupted by reaction, the gap before the urge. When you start noticing the mechanics of your own reactivity, you begin to reclaim the steering wheel of creation itself. Each time you observe instead of obeying the impulse, you reclaim energy from the loop. Each breath becomes a vote for coherence. Each pause rewires the circuitry that turns thought into fate. And the beautiful paradox is this: you don't have to fight the loop to escape it. You only have to see it. Because the moment you truly observe the pattern, you're no longer in the pattern. Observation is liberation. Just as particles behave differently under observation, your reality reorganizes when seen from stillness rather than struggle. The loop survives on unconsciousness. Awareness dissolves it on contact. This is the first threshold on your journey toward the observer effect as lived experience. You begin not by changing anything, but by seeing everything. By learning to notice the way your breath, your body, and your meaning-making machinery collaborate to project a world around you. When you truly notice the loop, it can no longer control you. And from that awareness, the quantum field begins to whisper its next invitation: coherence. Imagine the universe not as an expanse of empty space, but as a vast ocean of invisible potential, what physicists call the quantum field. In this ocean, every wave represents a probability waiting to be observed into existence. But here's the mystery: those probabilities don't become real until consciousness touches them. The simple act of noticing transforms potential into experience. This is the observer effect. And while the textbooks describe it in subatomic terms, you experience it every single day. You just call it feeling. When you experience emotion, you are not merely reacting to circumstance, you are tuning into a frequency within the field. Joy, fear, gratitude, and despair aren't just mental states. They're vibrational languages that tell the field how to arrange itself around you. The field doesn't interpret words, only coherence. If your internal rhythm is scattered, one part longing, one part doubt, the signal you send is noise. But when your emotion, breath, and attention align into a single note of awareness, the field responds with precision. It doesn't obey you, it harmonizes with you. Think of the quantum field as a mirror made of probability. When you stare into it from frustration, it reflects back fragments, delays, disruptions, mixed outcomes. But when you observe it from coherence, it becomes clear, glass, reflecting reality as your highest intention. The moment you notice right before the urge, the instant you become the witness instead of the reactor, you stop distorting the mirror. You start seeing what is truly there. Emotion in this sense is not weakness, it's navigation. The heart is not a poetic metaphor. It's the compass that translates between dimensions, the human and the quantum. Research from the HeartMath Institute reveals that your heart generates the most powerful electromagnetic field in your body, measurable up to several feet away. When your breath synchronizes with that rhythm, your entire nervous system begins to vibrate coherently, sending a clear signal into the field. But this isn't mystical exaggeration. It's lived physics. You felt it in those moments when life seems to flow, when doors open, synchronicities align, and intuition guides you flawlessly. That's coherence. You've also felt its opposite when nothing works, when friction replaces flow, when you push harder and achieve less. That's decoherence. The difference lies not in the field itself, but in your alignment with it. When you are incoherent, your observation scatters energy. You see reality through the prism of fear, dividing potential into opposites, good or bad, safe or unsafe, success or failure. But when you return to the observer's seat, awareness becomes a unifying force. The distinctions soften. Opposites collapse into one field of possibility, and your perception begins to shape events differently. You start noticing coincidences that are not coincidences at all, but reflections of your newfound coherence. You can feel this shift physically. Incoherence feels like tension behind the ribs, a tightness that wants to move but can't. Coherence feels like exhaling after holding your breath for years. It's a sensation of being breathed by something larger than yourself. Each wife intelligence, the field, whatever name you give it. In that state, your thoughts don't disappear. They simply stop being loud. The mind becomes an instrument, not a master. You begin responding to existence rather than reacting to it. The observer effect is not about control, it's about clarity. You don't force the field to obey. You learn to see it clearly enough that it reveals its natural harmony. Reality has always been interactive, but only consciousness can recognize the dialogue. When you are lost in reaction, it feels like life is happening to you. When you become the observer, you realize life is happening through you. The same energy that forms galaxies flows through your bloodstream, responding to your level of awareness. This isn't romanticism, it's participation. The great paradox is that you influence the field most when you stop trying to influence it. Because pure observation, free of grasping, judging, or forcing, is the highest form of participation. When you watch a sunset without naming its beauty, you're in coherence. When you listen to a loved one without planning your reply, you're in coherence. When you notice the urge to escape discomfort and simply stay present, you're in coherence. Each of these moments tells the field, I trust you. And the field reflecting that trust responds with order. This is how the observer wins, not by effort, but by resonance. In the stillness before the urge, awareness collapses infinite potential into the timeline that serves your highest evolution. It's not magic. It's the physics of consciousness in motion. When you become fully present, the wave of probability becomes the particle of your lived experience. And here's the quiet miracle: the universe has always been waiting for you to notice it, noticing you. That mutual recognition, observer meeting observed, is the origin of creation itself. When you feel that subtle intimacy between your awareness and reality, you understand what the mystics meant by as above, so below. Consciousness doesn't just observe the universe, it participates in its unfolding. And the breath you take right before the urge, that sacred unnoticed pause, is the gateway where that participation begins. Long before quantum language existed, ancient mystics described the same mystery through story, symbol, and ritual. They didn't speak of particles or probabilities, they spoke of breath, sky, and stillness. To them, awareness was the bridge between worlds, the invisible thread connecting human intention to cosmic design. You can find this bridge in every wisdom tradition, each one describing the same truth through its own imagery. In ancient Egypt, they called it the breath of Ra, the living current that animated the world. The priests of the mystery schools taught initiates to pause between breaths, entering what they called the silence of the sun. In that pause, they believed the soul could commune with the divine intelligence shaping creation. The walls of the temples at Abydos and Luxor depict this act as a winged disc hovering between two serpents, symbolizing the dual forces of motion and stillness, of action and observation. The initiates stood between them, learning to balance the energies of doing and being. To notice right before the urge was to them to stand at the exact center of that winged disk, where all opposites dissolve into light. Across the desert and centuries later, Buddhist monks spoke of the same space in different terms. They called it ānāpānasati, mindfulness of breathing. It wasn't simply a meditation on air entering and leaving the body. It was an exploration of impermanence, a recognition that between each inhale and exhale lies the still point where awareness touches eternity. When a monk truly observed that stillness, he discovered the same truth that quantum physics would one day express, that observation and creation are inseparable. The Buddha compared this awareness to the sky. Thoughts, feelings, and desires are clouds drifting across it, some bright, some dark, some dissolving, some gathering again. Yet the sky itself is never stained by their passage. No matter how dense the storm, the sky remains vast, open, unaltered. To realize your sky nature, as he taught, is to rest as the observer, to know that no cloud can define you. The art of noticing before the urge is the art of returning to sky consciousness before the next cloud claims your attention. In the Hebrew mystical tradition of Kabbalah, this awareness was depicted as the tree of life. Each sephira or sphere represents a stage of consciousness from the densest physical form to the purest divine light, the middle path of the tree. The pillar of balance is where the human and divine meet, where action flows from awareness instead of impulse. Mystics called the breath ruach, which means both wind and spirit. To breathe consciously was to allow the divine wind to move through you without distortion, aligning personal will with cosmic order. The practice wasn't about control, it was about alignment, allowing the current of existence to pass unobstructed through the vessel of awareness. When you begin to sense this shared language across civilizations, something extraordinary happens. You realize that the bridge between human and divine, between mind and matter, has always been the same attention carried by breath. Egypt's silence of Buddhism's mindful breathing, Kabbalah's ruach, all point to the same doorway, the gap where perception becomes creation. What modern physics calls the observer effect, ancient mystics lived as communion. They built temples to embody this principle. Step inside the sanctuaries of Karnak or Dendera and you'll feel it. The geometry itself guides breath into coherence. Every corridor narrows, slows the pace, draws attention inward. The air feels thicker. Time dilates, the mind quiets. The architecture teaches presence. The walls etched with stories of gods and stars remind the initiate that human awareness is the meeting place between heaven and earth. Standing at the temple's center, the initiate didn't pray for miracles. They aligned with them. In the same way, when you pause right before the urge, you are standing at your own inner temple's threshold. Your body becomes the structure, your breath, the offering, your attention, the sacred flame. The old stories were never just mythology, they were maps. The Egyptians spoke of crossing the duat, the underworld of shadow thoughts, to be reborn as the sun each dawn. The Buddhists spoke of seeing through Maya, the illusion of separateness. The Kabbalists spoke of ascending the tree toward unity. Each narrative describes the same transformation from unconscious reaction to conscious creation. When the ancient masters said, "as within, so without," they weren't making a moral statement. They were describing quantum law in metaphor. The outer world is a projection of the inner state. The moment you notice right before the urge, you step into the timeless role of the initiate, the one who remembers. You become the bridge between worlds, between breath and cosmos, between sky and cloud. That moment of noticing is not passive, it's sacred participation. It's the moment Ra pauses between his two serpents, when the Buddha breathes between clouds, when the tree of life becomes a single living current. Every tradition, every temple, every ritual has been pointing humanity toward this one realization that the divine is not somewhere else waiting to be found. It's right here waiting to be noticed in the stillness before the next breath. Let's bring this from metaphor into felt experience. The theories mean little until they become breath body and awareness moving as one. What follows isn't a technique to perfect, but a doorway to enter, a way to touch the observer effect through direct experience. Take this slowly. There's nothing to achieve. The practice isn't about controlling the breath, but about remembering that you are the bridge through which the breath flows. Find a quiet space somewhere your attention can rest without constant interruption. Sit or stand with your spine naturally upright, not rigid but awake. Allow your shoulders to release the weight they've been carrying all day. Let the lower belly soften as if you're granting permission to simply be. You're not meditating on anything yet. You're simply arriving, noticing that you are here. Begin by observing your breathing pattern. Don't change it, just notice its rhythm. Where does the breath begin? Does it start high in the chest or low in the abdomen? Is the inhale short and hurried or long and smooth? Let your awareness trace the full arc of one breath from beginning to end as though you were following a wave rolling onto the shore and retreating again. Now bring your attention to the moment between the inhale and the exhale. It might last less than a second, but within that stillness is the quantum gap. You don't hold it, you enter it. It's the same gap between thoughts, between impulses, between heartbeats. Rest there lightly like a feather resting on water. In that pause, notice the mind's urge to act, to breathe again, to label, to move. That urge is the river of habit. Observing it without following is the first act of liberation. If your body needs to breathe, let it. This is not breath, retention, or control. It's awareness moving with the body's natural rhythm. The breath will self-correct as coherence emerges. You're not teaching the body is teaching you. As you continue, bring your awareness to the chest. Feel the heart area expanding gently with each inhale and relaxing with each exhale. Imagine this area not as a muscle but as a radiant field, subtle, intelligent, warm. With every exhale, picture any tension dissolving into this field. You might even whisper, internally, observe, release, allow. 3 simple cues to guide the nervous system toward coherence. If thoughts arise, and they will see them as clouds floating across the sky of awareness. You don't chase them, you don't resist them. You notice them pass. The point isn't to empty the mind, but to recognize that you are not the movement within it. Each time you return to the breath, you strengthen the observer's seat. You're teaching your nervous system a new language presence instead of defense. Now let's refine this into a micro-protocol for daily life. Before opening your phone, take one conscious inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. Notice what's happening inside you, not the screen, not the to-do list, but the field of sensations within. Before replying in a difficult conversation sense, your feet on the ground and feel one full breath travel through your spine. Before reacting to a problem, take 3 coherent breaths and find the still point between inhale and exhale. That pause is not inaction, it's alignment. These small moments are quantum recalibrations. Every time you interrupt the loop with awareness, you create new neural and energetic pathways that favor observation over reactivity. You're literally teaching your system to broadcast coherence. This is what transforms your external experience over time, not wishful thinking, but the repeated act of presence. As you deepen this practice, you might notice subtle shifts, the breath becoming smoother without effort, the heartbeat slower, yet stronger, the mind quieter. These are signs of coherence, evidence that your inner field is harmonizing with the larger field around you. But if you experience emotion rising, sadness, frustration, even fatigue, welcome it. It's simply energy moving from unconscious storage into conscious release. Stay with the breath, stay with the observer. Remember, this is educational and experiential, not medical. If you ever feel dizzy, anxious, or overwhelmed, stop and return to normal breathing. The goal is not to transcend your body, but to inhabit it fully, gently, wisely. Through this simple act, awareness carried by breath, you begin to experience the observer effect, not as theory, but as intimacy. You feel the world responding to your inner state. A conversation softens, a problem untangles. Time seems to stretch. These are not coincidences. They are the field reorganizing around your coherence. Practice daily, this awareness becomes second nature. You start noticing urges before they become actions, thoughts before they become stories, emotions before they become identities. The field responds always to the quality of your observation. Breathe gently, observe clearly, and reality starts to reveal its living intelligence. What you're learning isn't a breathing exercise, it's a language. Each breath says, I am here, I am noticing, I am free. The moment you learn to pause right before the urge, you begin shifting from victim to creator. Until now, you may have believed that life happens to you an endless series of causes and effects of things you must fix or control. But the instant you become the observer, the entire mechanism reverses. You start to see that life is happening through you as reflection, as dialogue, as art in motion. The difference is subtle but revolutionary. You stop being the character lost inside the movie and remember you are also the screen. Every transformation begins with that pause. The breath between reaction and awareness is not empty space, it's the fulcrum of creation. When you catch it, you reclaim authorship of the story. Let's bring this into 3 tangible arenas: money, relationship, and leadership, because spirituality without embodiment is just concept. Imagine you're in the middle of a financial storm. A bill arrives unexpected and urgent. The stomach contracts, breath shortens, thoughts spiral. I'm not safe. I'll never catch up. This is the loop resurfacing. But this time, instead of rushing to act from panic, you notice. You feel the sensation in your body, heat in the chest, tightness in the jaw, and you breathe into it. Inhale, awareness. Exhale, release. You stay with the discomfort long enough to see the story behind it, perhaps a childhood memory of scarcity, or a belief that worth equals work. By noticing, you've already shifted frequency. You've moved from fear's broadcast to coherence's invitation. From that state, you still make practical choices. Budgeting, communicating, creating, but the energy behind them is different. They're guided, not grasping. The field now mirrors your stability, not your anxiety. Opportunities, ideas, even small coincidences start aligning with that inner clarity. You didn't force abundance, you became the space where it could land. Now consider relationship. Someone you love says something that hits the old wound, that ancient button that lights up your nervous system. The urge is immediate to defend, to attack, to retreat. But you remember the practice. You breathe before the words. You feel the storm gathering and decide not to add thunder. In that silence, awareness watches emotion without becoming it. You realize what you truly want isn't to win, it's to connect. The field inside you reorganizes from survival to empathy. When you finally speak, the tone is changed. The other person feels it too, though they can't explain why. You've shifted the energetic conversation beneath the literal one. This is coherence at work. 2 nervous systems tuning toward harmony through one person's awareness. That's leadership through love. Now take leadership itself, whether in a company, a classroom, or a family. A crisis hits. Everyone looks to you. The pressure to decide, to fix, to act immediately feels enormous. Yet beneath that pressure lies the same invitation: pause. Notice the breath. Observe the field before entering it. In that stillness, new information surfaces, insights you would have missed in reactivity. You sense the right words, the right tone, the right timing. The leader who can remain still in chaos becomes the eye of the storm, organizing order without force. Others unconsciously attune to that steadiness. This is not charisma, it's coherence radiating through presence. Each of these scenes reveals the same law: you don't change reality by overpowering it, but by observing it from a higher frequency. The observer doesn't fight the current, it alters the tide through resonance. Every time you meet a trigger with awareness instead of resistance, you create a new timeline. The pattern dissolves, the story rewrites itself, the energy field realigns. The victim asks, "Why is this happening to me?" The creator asks, "What is this showing me?" The first question drains energy, the second returns it. This is how you win through the observer effect, by transmuting reaction into revelation. The urge that once enslaved you becomes a signal that awakening is near. Notice how the mechanics mirror quantum law. When you collapse a wave by observing it, the outcome stabilizes around the energy of observation. Fear-based observation collapses chaos. Love-based observation collapses coherence. The quality of your gaze determines the form reality takes. Every emotion is a frequency request to the field. Every pause before reaction is a sacred opportunity to retune that frequency. Practice this daily. Before sending the email, before signing the agreement, before responding to criticism, pause, breathe, feel, ask. What energy am I about to encode into the field? This single awareness reshapes outcomes more profoundly than effort ever could. The turning point isn't about perfection, it's about participation. You're no longer the reactor trapped in feedback. You're the conscious participant shaping feedback into evolution. And as you live from that observer's seat, coherence stops being an exercise and becomes your nature. From here, the story of your life begins to read differently, not as struggle but as symphony. The notes of chaos still appear, but they harmonize within the larger melody of awareness. The universe meets you, note for note, adjusting to the frequency you maintain. This is the invisible art of creation, to notice before the urge to breathe into the gap, and to let the field sing its reflection of your stillness back to you. There comes a moment when the practice stops feeling like a practice and becomes the way you move through the world. The breath no longer requires your attention to find rhythm, it is rhythm. The observer no longer needs to remind you to pause. Pausing becomes your natural response to life. Stillness stops being something you visit and starts being where you live. This is coherence made human, awareness made flesh. At this stage, you begin to see how ordinary moments shimmer with quiet intelligence. You watch the way light folds across a wall at sunrise and realize that too is observation, collapsing probability into beauty. You notice the subtle choreography between strangers crossing a street, each adjusting unconsciously to the rhythm of another's steps. The field organizes through attention, whether conscious or not. What you call coincidence is consciousness balancing itself in real time. When you breathe as the observer, you don't escape the world, you rediscover your belonging within it. You start to understand what the mystics meant when they said the divine hides in plain sight. It isn't above the clouds or buried in scripture, it's here in the pulse of traffic lights, in the laughter of a child, in the brief silence before you answer a question. The field doesn't require you to withdraw from humanity, it invites you to participate with greater dignity, awareness, and compassion. Dignity arises naturally when you realize you're both the wave and the ocean. There's no need to prove yourself when you know that the entire tide moves through you. Meaning no longer depends on external validation, it's generated by the quality of your perception. Each time you choose to observe instead of react, to listen instead of defend, you restore a fragment of coherence to the human story. You become quietly and without announcement a stabilizing force in the collective field. Think of stillness as public art. It doesn't shout its presence, it simply shapes the space around it. A sculpture doesn't need to move to change how people move near it. In the same way, your stillness rearranges the subtle architecture of the moment. When you walk into a room anchored in breath, others unconsciously match your rhythm. Conversations soften. Decisions become clearer. Even conflict begins to dissolve, not because you imposed peace, but because peace found a conduit through you. This is agency without grandiosity, the gentle power of coherence. It doesn't seek credit, and it never needs control. It functions like gravity, invisible yet undeniable. The more you embody this awareness, the more life mirrors it back. People feel safe around you without knowing why. Circumstances organize around calm instead of chaos. What once felt like effort becomes flow. The field doesn't respond to your words, it responds to your state. In this realization, morality transforms into something deeper than rules, it becomes resonance. The right action is the coherent action, what harmonizes the moment rather than distorts it. You stop chasing outcomes and start tending to frequencies. Each thought, each breath, each silence becomes a brushstroke painting the world you inhabit. And yet this doesn't remove the human messiness. You'll still feel sadness, desire, anger, fatigue. The difference is that these no longer define you. They move through the sky of awareness like passing weather. You understand now that emotion isn't failure, it's communication. The body speaks in sensations the mind once feared to feel. When you listen without resistance, even pain becomes prayer. This is where philosophy meets humanity. Awareness is not escape, it's inclusion. To be truly awake is to hold every aspect of existence, the light and the shadow, with equal reverence. You begin to understand that coherence isn't uniform stillness, but the capacity to let everything have its place within the larger rhythm. In that understanding, compassion ceases to be a virtue and becomes your natural frequency. You were never meant to erase the world's noise. You were meant to be the quiet center through which that noise finds harmony. The observer within you isn't detached from life. It's the pulse that gives life its meaning. And when you live from that pulse, you realize the profound simplicity at the heart of all spiritual and scientific inquiry. Observation is creation, and creation is love perceiving itself. You've traveled from reaction to awareness, from chaos to coherence, from seeking control to embodying alignment. But the real victory isn't personal enlightenment, it's contribution. Each time you choose awareness, you offer stability to a world that has forgotten how to pause. Each moment of coherence you cultivate becomes an offering to the collective field, a silent act of service that says peace is still possible. And in that realization, something ancient and tender awakens inside you. The understanding that you were never separate from the source, never exiled from meaning. You were simply learning to see as the source sees, to notice, before the urge to love, before the defense, to breathe, before the noise. Now as this journey draws inward to its still point, let's make it tangible, an embodied ritual to anchor everything you've remembered. You don't need incense or mantras or sacred geometry. You only need awareness, breath, and willingness. Wherever you are sitting, standing, maybe listening with eyes half closed, let the world fade just enough for you to hear your own breathing. Take a slow inhale through the nose, not forced, simply allowing air to arrive. Feel it travel through your chest, your ribs, the quiet chambers of your heart. Hold it for a moment, not in tension, but in reverence. This is the first coherent breath. Exhale gently through the mouth as though releasing centuries of noise. The shoulders drop. The mind softens. The field begins to settle around your stillness. That's the second coherent breath. Inhale again, slowly into the belly this time. Feel the ground beneath you holding the weight of who you've been and who you're becoming. Pause at the top. This is the gap, the quantum threshold, the silence of Ra, the moment the sky meets the clouds but does not mix. Exhale through the heart, offering your awareness back to the field. This is the third coherent breath. Now choose a single word, not with intellect but with intuition. The first one that arrives softly, maybe peace, clarity, trust, freedom, stillness, light. Don't judge it, receive it. This word is your new frequency, your personal signature in the field. Whisper it inwardly as a declaration, almost like prayer, almost like code. I choose to your word as the observer. Feel what that means. The choice isn't about self-improvement, it's about alignment. It's you telling the field, I remember. You're broadcasting coherence through language, sealing awareness into matter. The words vibrate quietly through your bones, your cells, your breath. Imagine this word expanding beyond your skin, weaving itself into the space around you, the 8-foot field that your heart generates. The room feels subtly different now, calmer, clearer, as if space itself is listening. Because it is. The field is never indifferent to coherence. Stay for one more inhale. Notice the quiet power beneath simplicity. You don't have to visualize light or colors or cosmic geometry. Awareness itself is the light. Breath itself is the bridge. This silence is your technology. As you open your eyes or return to movement, carry this rhythm with you. Let each ordinary breath become a reminder that creation is ongoing, that observation is participation. You don't need to force change anymore. You only need to notice before the urge, breathe into coherence and let the field respond. If this practice resonates, if you felt the stillness open something wordless inside you, then stay connected to this frequency. Subscribe not just to a channel, but to a vibration of consciousness that values awareness over noise, coherence over chaos. Each time you return, you help strengthen the collective rhythm of calm observation this planet so urgently needs. And remember, this is not escape, it's embodiment. As you walk back into your world, the phone buzzing, the traffic humming, the heart beating, know that you are carrying a new signal through every step, every breath, every word. So take one final inhale for remembrance. One exhale for release, one silent moment for presence. You are the observer. You are the bridge. You are the stillness through which reality reorganizes itself. Subscribe to this frequency because coherence is contagious and awareness is how the universe remembers itself through you.